Yeah. I'll get that over to you here in a second. You should be tagged in it as well, but just in case it doesn't pop up for you.
I see it.
But, yeah, what's your favorite part of the offseason so far?
Of my offseason, or
just the football offseason?
For me, I think it's just it's participating in rookie drafts and starting to build that dynasty all over, and just doing what you can to learn as much about these rookies as possible, and the draft, of course. The draft is huge, the NFL draft. But from a fantasy perspective, the rookie drafts is what I most enjoy in terms of offseason. That and doing rankings in preparation for the coming year.
Yeah, I love rankings. This year, my favorite part is not having to deal with COVID, because that's absolutely amazing. Like, we actually get to see some of the rookie camps, get to watch some of those highlight videos, right? Those hype videos.
Yeah.
Those go really heavily into my rankings. Just saying. I'm totally kidding. They definitely don't. No, but I just love the aspect of actually being able to put, like, connections together, which is pretty much what we're going to talk about today. So I'm excited to dive into that. You ready to do this?
Sure.
All right, let's do it. Let's go live. Here we go.
This is Fantasy Intervention. Now here to intervene with your fantasy life, Chase Vernon.
Oh, yes, I am here. I'm here to bring you another Wednesday night fiasco. The madness is going to hit us straight in the face, but I'm not doing it alone. There's no way I could handle the show on my own. I had to bring in with me Jeff Haseley, of course, to help me handle this madness. Jeff, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I am good. Thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to tonight.
Whew, it's a lot of fun, man. Wednesday nights get a little bit crazy. We answer some questions in the chat. We get to interact with people, of course. And then this week, we actually are discussing some of the connections for the quarterbacks and some of these rookie wide receivers, and seeing if we're actually adjusting some of our rankings, because obviously you brought up prior to the show that your favorite aspect of the offseason, or one of them, is actually adjusting your rankings towards the upcoming season. So I'm very excited to actually dive into that. Before we do, however, can you let everybody know where to find you and what you got going on right now?
Oh, wow. Let's see. You can find me at footballguys.com. I do a lot of work there with articles. Rankings is really big right now. I'm doing all kinds of rankings. If there's a ranking, I'm doing it. So that's your redraft, your PPR, your IDP, your rookie, best ball, all that stuff. So Dynasty included. I'm doing that, as well as my podcast that I do myself, Carolina Fandom. I don't say with myself. I have a couple co-hosts that we talk with, and we basically talk to Carolina sports fans. It's all about Carolina sports fans, and particularly the Panthers, the Hornets, the Charlotte FC, their soccer team. So I do that as well, and I do a little bit of work here and there with Panthers SI. So yeah, I'm kind of busy.
Yeah, it sounds like it, man. How's the Panthers SI going? Like, how much work do they put on your plate over there for Sports Illustrated?
It's kind of do what you can. I do a lot of collaborative stuff with them right now. I do work when I can. They invite me to write, and I actually need to do some more of it. We did a lot with the draft, and kind of explaining and sharing with Panthers fans what our thoughts are on the picks, and not only that, but also on offseason moves. What's the story going to entail with Sam Darnold? The whole team, everything. So I have my opportunities to kind of share my opinions in more of a focused manner with the Panthers, with Panthers SI, as opposed to what I'm doing with Football Guys, where I'm writing mostly, just fantasy related stuff. So it's good. I like it.
It's a little bit of like a deeper look. And, we actually are going to dive into some of this Panthers content that you're putting out. But before we do, I want you to talk about something very, very important that you're doing, something that is near and dear to your heart, and something that people can help out with, but you can also help out them as well.
Yeah. So my brother-in-law was in the hospital for 4 months with COVID complications. It all started because he developed COVID. He had some really bad issues with his lungs. He was inches away from not being here anymore. And miraculously, against what the doctors thought, he survived. And he unfortunately, though, was in a coma for a full 4 weeks, almost 5 weeks. And outside of a coma after that, he had a tracheotomy. He couldn't talk, couldn't speak, couldn't move. There's a lot to do with, how he was handled or treated at the hospital in terms of, when he was in his coma. So, it's just really difficult. And finally now, though, he can talk, he can breathe, of course. He can walk around a little bit. He was released out of the hospital just a couple weeks ago, two weeks ago, week and a half ago. But he's still in a hospital bed in his home. He has physical therapy that he does, but he still kind of struggles to move the right side of his body because of the way that he just kind of laid during his coma. It's almost like if you think of your arm, when you fall asleep on your arm overnight and you wake up and you realize you can't move your arm, not at all. Like there's a tingly feeling. It's difficult. That's kind of how it is right now. So he kind of has to learn to use his muscles all over again on the right side of his body. And so that's a challenge. So anyhow, what I'm doing for him to raise some money on his behalf is just kind of doing something that I can put my talents and use towards. And that is to help people design their Twitter banners in like a sports theme. A lot of people have sports themed Twitter banners, and I enjoy making them. That's my background in graphic design. And I just, I told people I'll make you a Twitter banner. What I'm asking though for you is if you would please donate to my brother-in-law's cause. Just trying to raise money for him. And so far so good. I mean, we've done quite a bit. I think I've had 45 something donations from people. So that's excellent. I'm trying to reach my goal of $1,500 by next month. Hopefully I can reach that. And I enjoy making the banners. It's fun for me to design those banners for people and for them to be able to give back to me, to my brother-in-law. It's a special thing. So I appreciate you allowing me to talk about that.
No, man, it's awesome. And you guys can go find him at Jeff Haseley. That's Haseley over there on Twitter. Do you have your tweet pinned as to where they can actually go and donate?
I can get that. I will effort that here as we're talking. How about that?
Yeah, just to make sure that we actually have some people go and check that out. Make sure you guys go check them out on Twitter. But with that being said, go help them out. Let's go ahead and dive into some fantasy football talk, because I know that's why a lot of people are here. They want you to answer their questions, because people have questions lined up going out of left field, and I can't answer them all. I can't do it. So let's go ahead and start out with some questions that were hitting me because they're actually Panthers related. And we're sitting there and we're looking like the Panthers are a team that's ready to take that next step, right? Like they're putting all the pieces together. Joe Brady's doing a phenomenal job with that offense. Matt Rule is doing a phenomenal job running the organization as a whole. And we're sitting there and we're looking at how they replaced Curtis Samuel with the rookie Terrace Marshall, who, is looking to be a potential stud. They have Christian McCaffrey coming back. They added, a tight end. What was that? Tommy Tremble, I believe, right?
And Dan Arnold, too, in the offseason as well.
And Dan Arnold, who's most likely going to be the starter.
Mm-hmm.
So we're sitting there and we're looking at, some of these potential big-time pieces for this Panthers team. So when we sit there and we look at it, which player are you looking to break out for the Panthers, whether it be offense or defense? You can go whichever direction you like. Which player you can break out in this upcoming season?
Well, I mean, from a fantasy sense, I think it's good to talk about the offense. And I think that starts with Sam Darnold, right? And here he is coming over. It's kind of like it's like the opposite Sam Darnold of what he had in New York, right? He comes to Carolina, and now he has this bevy of weapons with McCaffrey. I mean, McCaffrey by himself is going to make Sam Darnold a better quarterback. And just simply because defenses don't know how to cover him, and not only him, but other people, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. It's just they can't cover everybody, and McCaffrey does a really good job. And one thing I'll say is with Joe Brady's offense, and this is something I'll always say, I mean, he uses a horizontal attacking offense, what's it called? A shallow cross offense is what the terminology is with Carolina, where you see a lot of their plays are designed not just to go downfield, but to horizontally break down their opponent. Which linebacker is going to cover McCaffrey, or which linebacker is going to cover a receiver? And one of those players is most likely going to be open, especially when you're running slant routes like that. So that is something that Joe Brady loves to run, and we're going to see a lot more of that. Terrace Marshall, who you mentioned earlier, is someone who can play that role. He can line out wide. But getting back to your question, though, who is the breakout player? I think it starts and ends with Sam Darnold. I mean, if Darnold struggles, I think the offense is going to sputter, right? You could say that both DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson need to score more touchdowns. I mean, Moore has 10 touchdowns in 3 years, and Anderson only had 3 touchdowns this past year. And with Curtis Samuel being departing to Washington, I mean, there's a total of 1,000 yards in terms of rushing and receiving receiver who is now, all those yards are vacated. So that's an additional 5 touchdowns. Yeah, McCaffrey is going to take some of that, but I mean, if the offense improves, there's going to be more touchdowns to go around. That offensive pie is just going to be bigger. So the breakouts on offense, I think it starts and ends with Sam Darnold. Maybe you could say DJ Moore as well. I think DJ Moore is a strong receiver. If he just gets into the end zone, he becomes an elite receiver, because only, Calvin Ridley and Stephon Diggs had more games of 90 yards receiving than DJ Moore. So, I mean, he's right there. He just needs to score touchdowns. And he's someone who I think could have, I mean, we say breakout. I mean, we've seen DJ Moore break out, but he hasn't really yet. You can't really call yourself an elite receiver until you've scored like double-digit touchdowns, or at least close to it. He needs to do that. So defensively, I would say J.C. Horn, their number 1 pick as 8th overall in the draft. I mean, he is going to be a huge piece to the defense. Not only is he a great cover corner that they haven't really had since James Bradbury, you can go further back than that with Josh Norman in terms of his attitude on the field. Bradbury is more of a quiet corner, but Horn kind of brings that intensity, and they haven't had that. That's going to help the pass rush out too, as well. So I could talk about the Panthers all day long, so I don't want to burn your ears here, but there is opportunity, especially for Terrace Marshall. I mean, if you think about it, we already know, he has excellent measurables, right? He's 6'2", 205 pounds. He ran a 4.39 40. He had almost 40 inches in the vertical jump, 39 inches. He's from the LSU fraternity of wide receivers that we've seen just recently. Justin Jefferson, right? Jamar Chase. I mean, you could go back with Odell Beckham. I mean, it's just it's a factory there. He knows Brady's offense, and he's going to fill the void that Samuel left behind, and he's a touchdown scorer. Yeah, the biggest thing about Terrace Marshall is that he's a touchdown scorer. He scored 23 touchdowns in his last 19 games at LSU, and you think, all right, well, how much of that was with Joe Burrow? He had 10 touchdowns in 7 games last year with 3 different quarterbacks at LSU who are trying to get their reps in. So, I mean, he can do it. And then, of course, he opted out. But he can, like I said, he can play slot. He can play out wide. He's going to be great on those crossing routes that I mentioned earlier. So, I mean, I think Marshall as a floor is going to have 5 touchdowns this year as a floor. So I really like him. I like him a lot. I like the fact that Carolina supports 3 top 30 wide receivers in their offense, and he's just the next person in line to benefit from that.
Now, I will sit there, not to rewind too far back on you, but DJ Moore, I mean, he was dominant for this offense right last year. He had 25% of the team's touchdowns, I believe, or at least red zone targets. So he was already up there, but the team just wasn't scoring touchdowns in the air, and that's a big issue. So Sam Darnold coming in, of course, is going to hopefully elevate DJ Moore. We look at Sam Darnold with a clean pocket. He was 6th in the league in his completion percentage with the clean pocket. We look at Teddy Bridgewater last year, and with their quick release system that they have over there for Carolina, you're sitting there and talking about the 6th best clean pocket percentage for a quarterback when it comes to Teddy Bridgewater in Carolina last year, just because it was quick release after quick release for the most part. So with that being said, you're talking about a perfect storm for Sam Darnold with weapons that he's never even dreamt of having over there.
Right.
I mean, sitting there and looking at the team as a whole, they have 17 first and second round picks as their starters on this roster. 12 of those 17 were drafted by the team. So you're talking about a great system of developing these players and getting them all on the same page. And I'm very, very excited for Carolina. But, you know, we've already sat there. We talked about Robbie Anderson briefly, but there's been a bunch of rumblings about how he's going to be a free agent moving forward. And sitting there and looking at it, I just don't know why they would do this. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for me. I mean, if their passing attack comes out and it's fire, and he leads the team again in overall points, I believe, for the position. You're sitting there and you're looking at no massive contracts coming up. You could easily give him a 2-year deal that's actually 3 years, but, you know, void the 3rd year type thing and have him for another couple of years. I think that's a good thing for Terrace Marshall to an extent as he continues to develop. But sitting there and looking at it, you know, would you bring back Robbie Anderson in like a 3-year deal? Or is this something as to where like you just want to go ahead and move away from him and give Terrace Marshall a chance to be that number 2 in this offense?
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure about that. You make an excellent point as far as, you know, there's really not a big name on that 2022 free agent list that Carolina has. I mean, the biggest thing is Taylor Moton, their right tackle. They want to sign him long term. He was franchise tagged. So he probably would be the number 1 player to sign. After him, it's Anderson. Maybe they're waiting for the right time to extend him, to sign him. Maybe they're also thinking that Joe Brady might be going elsewhere next year, so they're not sure what kind of offense they're going to run.
Yes.
That's another topic for another day.
Yes.
So that's a possibility, right? But yeah, they're in a good situation with their salary structure. So yeah, I mean, we're going to find that out for sure. I mean, Anderson had 95 catches last year. Very quietly had 95 catches, and 3 touchdowns, right? That tells me he's either going to have less receptions or, more touchdowns, or probably somewhere in a little bit of both. But yeah, maybe they're just waiting on the timing involved to signing him, because they have that opportunity for sure.
I can get on board with that. I can get on board with them resigning him. But honestly, at this point, we do have people that are worried about Terrace Marshall to an extent. He is still going towards like the late 2nd round in super flex drafts from what I've seen overall. But obviously he has the talent to be able to perform over there. However, how is he going to be used is the big question, because he could play the big man in the slot, but he didn't play a ton of that in college. He played a decent amount, but he didn't play a ton. Meanwhile, you have DJ Moore, who overall, to an extent, failed as a deep threat receiver last year. I mean, his receptions were down. His contested catches were down. He can make contested catches and stuff as long as he's a little bit close to the line of scrimmage. He could deal with the contact. But getting DJ Moore the ball in space underneath fits his skill set a little better. Even the intermediate routes is okay, but the deep balls just were not working for him. So we saw back in 2019 how he was overall pretty successful, wide receiver in 2019 when it comes to his catch percentages. Almost everything dropped off outside of, I believe his yards ended up pretty close to where he was. Now, are they going to end up running Robbie Anderson as the X and have Terrace Marshall as a deep threat and have have DJ Moore work underneath? Or do you think that he can end up playing more of the the big slot role moving forward with Terrace Marshall?
I kind of see him more as a slot role, but we've seen, as far as his scores, he's scored from all over the field, and wherever the line of scrimmage is. And in all a multitude of different ways. So I think he'll be used a lot in the red zone. And one thing that you mentioned as far as like 2019 DJ Moore and then moving on to 2000 or 2020, he kind of had a little bit of a drop off. Well, the common denominator there is Christian McCaffrey. So I think when McCaffrey returns, that offense is just going to gel even more because, as I said earlier, defenses have to account for McCaffrey, and he's either going to get the ball, make a play, or he's going to be a decoy and someone else makes a play. That's just how it is. That's how Joe Brady has designed the offense, that shallow cross, horizontal attacking offense, where the defense is going to have to be on their toes. They're going to have to try to figure out, like, you play a zone defense versus man-to-man, and they'll eat you up. The teams that they struggle against are the teams that play really tight man-to-man and don't play the zone, because then they don't have that ability to find that open player necessarily in terms of the route running. But with McCaffrey, I mean, there's a lot that they can do. There's an awful lot that they can do, and getting him back is going to help out everybody.
All right, so we already talked about Sam Darnold, right? And Sam Darnold, has a huge potential to really lift off in this offense. Did Terrace Marshall affect his ranking at all? Like, did he budge at all up, or obviously not down, but did he go up a little bit knowing that you have a safe third receiver in this offense outside of Christian McCaffrey?
I mean, I don't know if his ranking went up or down just as a result of Marshall. I mean, I've got Darnold right now ranked 26th. I mean, that's fairly low, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to think about all these other quarterbacks, though. I mean, shoot, I have Matt Ryan ranked like 17th, excuse me, which is low for Matt Ryan. I mean, just think of all the other players, though. You've got Trevor Lawrence coming in. You've got Tua coming in. You've got Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Ben Roethlisberger, Matthew Stafford, Baker Mayfield. They all have to have a spot somewhere. So that like 16 to like 24 ranking, that everybody in there, I mean, that could be anybody. You could switch out the 17th ranked quarterback and the 25th ranked quarterback. Either that or, like flip flop all up and down, right? I mean, I could change my rankings and not really be too much worried about it, right? I mean, you've got a lot of quarterbacks who can do well in that range. So I have Sam Darnold 26th because he has to prove it to me. He has to show that he can do it. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater was what did he finish last year? I want to say it was 19th, 20th.
That's pretty impressive.
Something like that. Yeah, that's pretty decent, right? I think preseason he was like 23rd or 24th, somewhere around those lines. So he did well, but he didn't do well enough, in my opinion. And I think we're gonna see Sam Darnold be in that same light in terms of being in the early 20s in terms of rankings, who could potentially move up. Could he outperform his ADP? Absolutely, he can. In fact, he's someone that I would target as a second quarterback in leagues where you want to have where you have more depth. But there's a lot of quarterbacks like that. You could substitute out Darnold for Jameis Winston. Jared Goff. What if Jared Goff has 4,500 yards passing this year?
Because he has to pass that often.
Right. I mean, with fantasy quarterbacks, I mean, it just seems like they're a dime a dozen after like this 16th or 17th ranked quarterback. So,
and I think that's what creates such a huge variance in these rankings with quarterbacks. Like, you'll see, one guy that's 26 in the rankings, meanwhile somebody else is 12th. And so, like you talked about, they kind of are a dime a dozen after a certain point, which is why I think it's like so important for you to actually, get these higher end guys sometimes instead of trying to wait for these dime a dozen guys to fall to you, especially in those super flex leagues when you have a second guy. But you never know. You could end up hitting gold. Like, I mean, Derek Carr was being drafted as like the 30th overall quarterback at one point, and yet he was finishing out as like, 13, 14. So sometimes you can't hit that gold. But I want to stick on this. I want to sit there and I want to talk about, some of these quarterbacks, because some of these teams did improve their wide receiving room like tremendously. And some of these skill position players can really help out certain players. You brought up how the fact that Christian McCaffrey, he could end up adding 100 receptions to Sam Darnold's total every year. And it will be, an additional, 1,000 yards, 800 yards, something in that range. So let's go ahead and kind of explore that. And I want to start out with a guy who kind of reminds me of another player who has a little bit of mobility, right? And he made the jump last year, or he was supposed to make the jump last year, because they added a whole bunch of weapons around him when we talk about Drew Lock. And this player for me is actually Daniel Jones. Like, can Daniel Jones fail this year? Can he? Is it possible that Daniel Jones can fail this year? And what are the odds? Give me percentage odds that he can fail, and tell me like where you have him ranked, and we'll go from there.
All right. Yeah, he can fail this year. There's a non-zero chance that he'll fail this year. I mean, he has no excuses, like Sam Darnold, right? He has no excuses if he struggles because New York has given him weapons. Now he's got Saquon Barkley back. He's got Kenny Golladay, which is new. Sterling Shepard, of course. Darius Slayton, even. And also, too, is coming back to health is Evan Engram. And then, of course, you have your rookie, Kadarius Toney. Where does he fit in there? So, I mean, there's a lot of weapons now with New York. The part that I'm a little bit concerned about here is Jason Garrett's offense and how he's going to turn that into a juggernaut. Can he turn it? We're going to find out if he can. But so Daniel Jones has an opportunity. And one thing about Jones is he also is a strong running quarterback. So, and who knows if that will continue. We've seen quarterbacks with be a dual threat, and that kind of peters off a little bit as they, get a couple years in the league. But that's going to help his fantasy ranking. And like I said, these quarterbacks who are in that like the late teens, early 20s, that's where I have Daniel Jones. I have him right now 24th. I have him ahead of Sam Darnold. Yeah, right. I mean, just think about it. There's so many good quarterbacks. Ryan Tannehill is a darn good quarterback. He's 14th for me. Where's Deshaun Watson going to be? He's got to be in there. What about Trevor Lawrence? There's so many quarterbacks. You think, all right, well, that's a bad number, 24. Geez, really? I mean, shoot, Derek Carr is probably like mid-20s, and he's a darn good quarterback too, right? They're all, like I said, they're a dime a dozen, it seems. He needs to break out of that. What's the term?
That like the mold or like that tier essentially.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. He needs to graduate from that tier. Maybe we could say it that way, and elevate himself up to the next status, kind of the way that Ryan Tannehill did, or that Joe Burrow did. We sort of had high expectations for Burrow, but still, he went out and did it. Daniel Jones had somewhat high expectations, but he didn't necessarily go out and do it. So I'm still waiting on him. This is like a make or break year for him, just as it is Sam Darnold. Just also, so it is also for Tua Tagovailoa, which we'll talk about later. But as far as Kadarius Toney is concerned, how do I feel about him? Because I feel like you're going to ask that next question. Because you're
that's
going
to be it. Well, did Toney actually take a hit by going to the Giants? I'm going to ask you that first. Did Toney take a hit by going to the Giants instead of maybe going to Green Bay or a trillion other places?
Sure. I think so. I think he did. I think his stock took a hit. I mean, there's a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of talents on the Giants roster and all around him, and he'll need to carve out a role, some sort of a role. And even if he does do that in year one, I mean, that role might be kind of small. So I don't really have a whole lot of, I don't have high expectations for Toney this year. I think he'll have to work his way in. And depending on how well he does trying to carve out a role will determine how much of a role he can have. So long term, I like Toney. I mean, he's the type of receiver, he can put his foot in the ground, man. He can move you. I think he needs to learn a little bit more in terms of his route running, but I mean, like all receivers do. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's just an opportunity for him to learn and to grow and to, just learn that next level. And because he doesn't necessarily have like red zone potential, so he's going to have to do it other ways. So we're going to find out, but I think right now that it's a little bit stacked up against him this year, especially with all those weapons in front of him.
So I'm going to say that Toney probably did not elevate Daniel Jones in your rankings, just to put it out there. I'm going to guess that did not happen, but there is a player that might have helped elevate another guy in your rankings. We talk about Bateman, right? Who the community seems to be split on. They are so split on Bateman. Bateman, for me, I've seen the biggest variance in draft position from Bateman than any other player. And if you guys in the chat can actually give me a different player that has more variance when it comes to like draft position, then please do. But when we sit there and we look at Bateman, like 2 days ago or 3 days ago, we had a rookie draft. and he went at the 111 in this draft. This draft that I did today, both of them are 2 quarterback, by the way, super flex leagues. He went at the 208 in the one that we were doing today. So we're sitting there and we're looking at such a variance. I mean, we're talking a full round of difference in draft capital. So where does Bateman fall for you is the first question. And did he actually help elevate Lamar Jackson's position for you in the rankings at all?
So I like talking about Rashad Bateman because he's such an interesting topic. I was really high on him coming into the NFL draft, coming into the pro day. But then when he hit and he was like 208 pounds, something like that. When he went in his pro day, he was 190 pounds. So that kind of took me a little bit down in terms of my interest level in Bateman. And then when he went to the Ravens, I also decided myself, I said, you know what? I'm not necessarily high on this guy either. So I'm shying away from Rashad Bateman in rookie drafts. I would much rather have Terrace Marshall and the offense that can support 3 wide receivers in terms of fantasy speaking. I mean, Baltimore can't even support 1. They're a run-heavy team, and they're of course they have a strong presence at tight end with Mark Andrews, and they have some hit and miss wide receivers, right? And nothing too consistent for best ball. Yeah, that's great, but I mean, just looking at how many top 10 fantasy weeks do you think Baltimore had in 2020?
Ooh,
in terms of their wide receiver talent.
Repeat that question one more time.
How many top 10 fantasy weeks did Baltimore wide receivers have in 2020?
So I know over the last 6 weeks of the season, Marquise Brown finished up as wide receiver 13, I believe. He might have hit top 10 because obviously there's a huge variance when it comes to scoring to get in the top 10 because wide receivers just aren't consistent, although he was. I'm going to say that he finished up in that area 4 times, maybe 3.
So the entire team in 2020 did it 1 time, and that was Willie Snead.
Oh, he never finished in the top 10, but he finished on his 13?
Yeah, he never finished a top 10 week. No, he never had a top 10 week. So compare that to, as I just mentioned, Carolina. I'll turn this into a Carolina show, right? But Carolina, who supported 3 wide receivers, they had 7 instances where they had a top 10 wide receiver, finish in the top 10 in any given week. Now let's expand that out further to top 20. Baltimore did have 5. Right? That's not bad. That's not that bad. Or that's not that good. Carolina had 13, and I'm just using Carolina as a measuring stick here because I did for their top 10 as well. But so Baltimore needs to do a little bit more in terms of their wide receivers, and I'm not sure that's in their DNA for their offense. It's just not. They like to run the ball, and they like to use their tight end, and they also like to use Lamar Jackson, as on his own. Now, you asked the question, you said, does Rashad Bateman increase the value of Lamar Jackson? I don't think so. I think Lamar Jackson's the same player with or without Rashad Bateman. I do have Lamar Jackson ranked number 3, though, behind Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. So I think that Jackson has a rebounding type of fantasy year, and I think a lot of that has to do with the running game. I think J.K. Dobbins is going to take off, and I think we'll see a lot from him. But Jackson, I think his dual threat nature and his ability to run, I think is going to elevate him in terms of fantasy. I think he's a top 5 quarterback, and I have him 3rd.
Jeff, I don't mean to doubt you, my man, but I was so shocked because I knew that Marquise Brown finished up as wide receiver 13 from weeks 12 through 17. So I was like, dude, how does he not have 1 wide receiver 1 finish? No, he was just overly really consistent. Wide receivers normally are. He finished wide receiver 14, 32, 29, 22, 34, and 15. But that point combination, because they all were really high overall, and the receiver position is so sporadic, ended up still finishing him as wide receiver 13. But you were dead on. Like, he had no wide receiver 1 finishes. My mind is blown right now.
Well, my mind is blown. Here's the thing with Brown, and like I said, they had 5 top 20, and Brown, I'm sure, was either all 5 or close to it. But yeah, it's getting back to consistency, and with fantasy, we want consistency. And Baltimore is great for best ball, because Marquise Brown's going to get a couple touchdowns for you. He will, and you don't have to pick which week it happens. But being able to decide if you want to start Marquise Brown in your roster every week, no thanks. I don't want that. I want to have. That's why I kind of shy away from him a little bit and shy away from the Baltimore offense in general for wide receivers, because that's what we get. Now, until Rashad Bateman tells us otherwise, and remember, I was high on Bateman coming into the draft. And then, of course, the pro day with his weight loss issue. But then with Baltimore, yeah, it just kind of gave me pause. And you have to look at the DNA of their offense, and it just doesn't support one wide receiver, let alone two.
So he was, 6'3" in high school, 6'2" in college. He's 6 foot coming to the NFL. How short do you think he's going to be by, 2024, 2025?
What do you mean, Bateman?
Yeah.
I don't know. You know how those things change.
I'm just kidding. Oh, man.
His foot size is different now.
We actually have a special guest that wanted to come in here. He saw your message earlier. So I want to welcome in Bob Gilchrist over there. And Bob has a little message for you because he did see the intro to the show and he wanted to come in and just talk to you real quick. Bob, what's going on, man? Oh, you on mute, Bob?
Yes, I was on mute because that happens. No, Jeff, I just wanted to reach out, and I did not see your tweet originally about your brother. And I've got a few of the guys at the Scott Fishbowl Abbey Makers that are happy to help if you get overwhelmed with the amount of banners you've got, and we'd also like you to join us.
Okay. Yeah, sure. That sounds great. I appreciate the help. Definitely looking
I know it can get overwhelming.
Yeah, it can. I've done a pretty decent job of staying on it, but I mean, they keep coming. So, I'm still getting requests. It was kind of hot and heavy early, but it slowed down a little bit, but I'm still getting some, and I still have some that I need to do. So yeah, maybe I do need to delegate, so we should say.
Absolutely. I'm very good at delegating.
I think another big thing too is the fact that he could probably help you reach, because people are constantly reaching out to try and get, avatars made, of course, for the Scott Fishbowl. So, I'm sure that you guys can loop up and actually get some of those done for you.
Absolutely. And I'd be happy to have you come in. I didn't start it, but I do have a little reach that we can retweet it and get it out there a little bit more.
Great. That sounds good. Thanks, Bob. And
obviously you have more reach than I do.
Well, don't sell yourself short there, man. As far as helping out on the Scott Fishbowl avatars and banners, yeah, I'd love to do that. It might only be, here and there, but just to be able to take part and assist with that, yeah, I'd love to do that. Thank you.
All right, Bob. Appreciate you, man, for coming in. I'm sure you guys can get linked up on Twitter. And if you guys want to go donate and get your Abby made or get a banner made for your Twitter page, go check out at Jeff Haseley, Haseley, over there on Twitter. Go get some stuff made for you. All right. Appreciate you for coming in, Bob.
All right. I'm going to run. I go see a rocket or some kind of space thing. I have no idea.
All right. Later, man.
Bye.
All right.
Take care, Bob. Thanks. Chase, I do want to say if you would like to donate, or if you want to see the tweet that I sent out, it's pinned to my Twitter handle. So if you go look at my if you look at my profile, it's the first tweet there that's pinned. So you can access it there.
All right, sounds good, man. That's awesome. I'm stoked for you. All right, so let's go ahead and let's hop over to another mobile quarterback, right? Who he may be affected. We got Kyler Murray up there. And they added Rondale Moore, who I feel like this is the dream scenario for both players. Kyler Murray can free his linebackers, some of the coverage underneath, acting like he's run. Meanwhile, Rondale Moore plays very well underneath. He can still end up catching some deep balls and whatnot, so I'm not trying to take away from that. But, they sit there and they let A.J. Green go down the field. They let Christian Kirk kind of stretch out the field, although I don't know why they have been doing that, but they have been. Andy Isabella, and then, of course, DeAndre Hopkins. If they sit there and they let these guys kind of play down the field, from time to time, they can always let Rondale Moore end up playing close to the line of scrimmage, getting the ball in his hands, allowing his athleticism to go make plays up against secondary or tertiary cornerbacks. So if we're sitting there, we're looking at that, Rondale Moore could actually have an explosive season, and then Kyler Murray might not have to run as much. Obviously he had the issue when his shoulder fell on, so I think he opted to run a little bit more than he might not have if he didn't get fallen on. But if we're sitting there and we're looking at it, is Rondale Moore, where does he end up? Is this the perfect marriage? And could he help elevate Kyler Murray's game to get to that next level?
So yeah, I guess it helps Murray somewhat. And in terms of Rondale Moore now being on the roster, but I mean, Murray's alpha receiver, as you already mentioned, is DeAndre Hopkins. So I mean, it's possible that Moore comes in and he sees a lot of reps, right? But he'll need to earn that. And unless of course they really, really want to motivate him to be a part from the beginning and be that field stretcher or be that horizontal attacking receiver in a slot pattern, someone who could really do well in that type of offense. So I kind of see Moore with like maybe a maximum of 50 catches this year. That's kind of like my ceiling for him. And he'll battle in terms of targets for, I don't know, I'd say upwards of, it could be 80 to 100 targets. That's possible. But, he's definitely going to have his work cut out for him with A.J. Green and Christian Kirk, who you mentioned. Does it help Murray? I've got Murray ranked 6th. I have him 6th. And I like Kyler Murray. I just think that and he's someone that I would definitely target because these good quarterbacks like Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott is one of my favorite quarterbacks to target in redraft this year because teams are forgetting about, or owners are forgetting about him, it seems. They're more worried about Patrick Mahomes. They want to Josh Allen. They want even Russell Wilson. They want Lamar Jackson. And that allows guys like Prescott, Murray, Herbert, right, to fall into that 5th, 6th, even 7th round. And, you could have a pretty decent roster before you even take your quarterback, and then you come away with a stud quarterback. I like that approach in terms of my fantasy drafting. So that's my edge. Kyler Murray is right in that mix. And does Rondale Moore make him better? I'm not so sure. Kind of like Lamar Jackson and Rashad Bateman. Jackson is who he is, and Murray is who he is, and the offense will continue regardless of whether Moore's there or not. Will he help? Sure, I think he will help. He'll help himself, but I think Murray is still the same with or without him.
That's interesting because I feel like this is something that could end up going forward for 10 years or so, as to where they could both benefit off each other. Now you have a dominant slot receiver. Like, would Tom Brady ever be, as great as he was without having Wes Welker as a security blanket, essentially? And yeah, there's a good chance he would have been very, very good, but would he put up the same stats? I don't know if that's the case because Wes Welker was tremendous at converting third downs, keeping the chains moving, etc. And if he wasn't there, Tom Brady really didn't have anybody else to throw to. So by extending drives and by offering more upside, I feel like there could be a little bit there when we're sitting there, we're looking at Rondale Moore actually adding to Kyler Murray's value. I actually had Kyler Murray at 4 prior to the draft. And I did move him up to 3 after the draft because I just feel like it's that security blanket guy that could end up extending plays for you. Very similar to how, it gives you an alpha receiver to go up and grab balls in the end zone and stuff. And all of a sudden you're looking at, touchdown passes instead of field goals. So yeah. I didn't actually move Lamar Jackson, but I did move Kyler Murray up 1 spot.
It's interesting. And also too, with Moore, he just needs to also stay healthy. We saw him miss a lot of games in college. So he needs to prove that he's not, Glass Joe, and be able to withstand the NFL and what it takes and the defenses that are trying to stop him. So, I still think at the end of the day, Kyler Murray is still Kyler Murray. He's still a great quarterback, and the reason why is because he's such a dual threat. He can run, he can pass, and he does both well. He's the new age Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
We're seeing that. And those are the types of quarterbacks that we want to target in our fantasy drafts, whether it's dynasty or redraft, either way. But Murray is an excellent target, in my opinion, just as I mentioned to Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert. Being able to get that quarterback in the 7th round of a redraft league is strong if you can get one like that.
All right, so we do have a group of young quarterbacks, right? We talk about how these young quarterbacks coming out crushing it with Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and how they're creating opportunities for themselves. But then we also have another group where they're going to their second year. We got Hurts, we got Burrow, and we have Tua. So which one benefited the most from adding a rookie wide receiver? Because obviously Tua ended up with Waddle, Burrow ended up with Chase, and Hurts ended up with Devonta Smith. Which one benefited the most from adding a wide receiver?
I mean, I think they're all going to benefit, to be honest. But which one benefited the most? I probably would say Tua, honestly, because you have to throw in Will Fuller, too, as well, during the offseason. So that not only do they have Parker, they have Will Fuller, and they have Jalen Waddle, and they still have Preston Williams. So, I mean, they've got talent. Plus, they've got Mike Gesicki, however you pronounce his name, at tight end, too, who is very quietly an extremely athletic tight end that doesn't get enough recognition for that. So, I mean, Miami has definitely developed and produced quite an offense around Tua. Like Daniel Jones, like Sam Darnold, there are no excuses really for Tua. This is his make or break year, I think. Even though it's his second year, he didn't necessarily, rise to the occasion last year. So there was some concern there, and maybe it's because he's still kind of getting over that hip injury and trying to get back to 100%, and maybe that's more mental than physical as well. But now he's got opportunity, and he's got weapons. You can't say he doesn't have the weapons. So I picked Tua there out of those three. I mean, Jalen Hurts is going to get a lot in terms of an opportunity with Devonta Smith coming. Joe Burrow with the reunion with Jamar Chase. Plus he has T. Higgins as well as Tyler Boyd. So, I mean, those are all strong offenses with some really good, young, talented wide receivers. But Tua, in my opinion, is the one who benefits the most. Because if you think about it, his offense last year was not a down the field type of offense. He was kind of reminded me a little bit of Ben Roethlisberger when he was a rookie. You remember?
Yep.
Roethlisberger, what was he? He finished like 14-2 as a rookie. But he wasn't a big fantasy asset. That wasn't him. He was a take your time, pass the ball, move the ball, game manager type of quarterback.
We're going to run it as much as we can, and you're not going to hurt us.
Right. Yeah. Back then, of course, they had, the running backs, Willie Parker, Jerome Bettis, all that. But Tua is kind of in that same I kind of see them also too. He needs to graduate from his tier. And that's a possibility that he could do this year with all these weapons.
So which one of these quarterbacks actually has like the most to prove? Because we have Tua, who needs to prove that he can make the right reads and deliver the ball accurately. It's something that he did well in college. It's not something he did well in the pros, although I do believe play calling has a little bit to do with that. But he still has to prove that he can do it in the pros. Hurts, who has to hold on to the ball and not cause turnovers. And then we have Burrow, who has to prove that he can play a full 16 games without a solid offensive lineman.
Yeah. I think that Burrow is probably the least one, the least that we need to worry about. I think he'll be okay. I think he'll be fine. Tua, we still haven't quite seen it yet, and Hurts, we have, but we haven't seen the consistency. I think Hurts
He's great for fantasy.
yeah, good for fantasy, right? At Tua, we still need to see it. So I think that in terms of the quarterbacks who have the most to prove, I think it's definitely Tua. I mean, like I said, he's got a lot on his shoulders right now. Him, Darnold, Daniel Jones, they're kind of in the same boat. There's no excuses if he struggles. So yeah, I would say Tua is the one who has the most to prove.
So out of those wide receivers that we talked about, right, with Waddle, with Devonta Smith, and then with Jamar Chase, which one actually has the best rookie season? Not career, just rookie season.
Chase, Waddle, or Smith? I'm going to say Chase. I think it's Chase. I think that the combination of Chase going back with Burrow is just going to be too much. Now, T. Higgins was great in that offense last year, and maybe that's because he was the top wide receiver on the team, and I don't necessarily see that anymore. I think Chase is that guy. I don't think there's going to be much of a ramp-up time needed for Jamar Chase. I think he's going to hit the ground running, and Burrow's going to be a huge piece to that, as long as Burrow is the same Burrow that we saw last year before the injury.
big if, but
Yeah, that is a big if. But I'm not that worried about it. I'm just the way that quarterbacks nowadays can come back from a torn ACL and perform well. Granted, we didn't necessarily see that with Carson Wentz, did we? Carson Wentz was a near MVP candidate in 2017, and then he struggled to gain that respect back ever since. Burrow, to me, just seems like a quarterback who has that it factor, not necessarily athleticism. He's sort of athletic, but it's more of his passing ability. He's like the closest thing to Peyton Manning, in my opinion, in terms of these young quarterbacks that's out there. So, Burrow has that ability, and I think he'll be okay. So I'm thinking that him and the reunion with Jamar Chase is going to be the reason why Chase is the best rookie wide receiver this year.
Let's go from young to old now. All right, we have one quarterback who has only finished as a quarterback one time. I believe it was like quarterback 11 or so.
Okay.
If we're sitting there, and I think this was when he played with the Jets, we have Ryan Fitzmagic, right? Who not only has he not played on a regular basis in terms of playing full seasons, but he also has never been consistent his entire career when it comes to interceptions thrown, turnovers, accuracy rate. Like, he's been all over the place, and it's understandable because he just doesn't give a fuck as to how he moved, what it takes to move the ball and what it takes to win a game. He just doesn't care. He's going to go out there and he's going to throw it where he wants to throw it. He's going to put it where he wants to put it. Now, it's not always accurate, but it still is what he wants to do, and that's his mindset. Now he's 39 years old. He's coming into Washington. He now is set up probably one of the top, 2 times, right, that he's ever had, wide receivers in his life. The other time was with the Jets when he finished as quarterback 10 or 11, whatever it was. He has De'Ami Brown, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas, Antonio Gibson, and J.D. McKissick out of the backfield. Like, that's a pretty lethal combination. It still might take a year or two to get them up to full steam, but that's still pretty lethal. If we sit there and we look at it, is Fitzpatrick in the best situation he's ever been in with a great defense as well? And does he have a chance? Is there a chance that he could finish in the top 12 this year?
I think if he finishes, then there's a chance that he finishes in the top 12. I think we're going to find this out because you mentioned that Fitzpatrick is there in Washington. He doesn't have that much behind him. So it's either him or bust, right? So Fitzpatrick is one of the best sneaky fantasy quarterback starts, that you can play until he hits that wall, like around week 8 or week 9, where it's like Fitzpatrick is great weeks 3, 4, 5, 6, and then like 7, 8, 9. It's like, what happened to Fitzpatrick? Where'd he go?
Well, he threw 50 balls 10 times a game, he threw the ball 50 yards 10 times a game. So of course, his arm is dead by that point in the season.
If you were to shave his beard, I swear he would be the youngest 39-year-old quarterback that I think I've ever seen. Maybe next to Tom Brady or Phillip Rivers. Rivers would be 39 this year, I think, right? So, Fitzpatrick is, he has that opportunity. I'm just kind of concerned about his longevity, not just overall, but the course of this year. But like you said, though, his competition is scarce. There's really not much after him. And that's what we've seen before in the past is, he's signed to a team. He's like a consultant. He's consulted to a team to do well and to raise it up well, or at least be like the go-between, be the bridge before the next quarterback arrives. That's what we've seen out of him in his career. And he doesn't really have that bridge quarterback behind him right now. It's just him. So he'll need to stay healthy, but he has a chance to have a career year. And that, like you mentioned, that would be a top 12 finish. And in terms of being an older quarterback, I hear it's not necessarily a bad thing, with all the success that older quarterbacks have had. Most recently, of course, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. You could throw Brett Favre in there.
Ben Roethlisberger still finished out as quarterback 14, and he had a terrible year last year, but he still finished out as quarterback 14, I believe.
Wow. Yeah, it's because he can throw it. And there's a place
they needed to throw it, too.
There's definitely a place for that. And Fitzpatrick has that ability. He just needs to stay completely healthy. And he also has to stay accurate as well. And that's like what I said before, when he hits the wall, it's kind of like teams figure him out for some weird way. He's great at first, and then he kind of just falls off a cliff. And then we kind of need to see Fitzpatrick Stay on that cliff. Stay on that cliff, Ryan.
Stay on. Don't jump. Don't jump. All right, Jeff. That's going to finish up our episode. But before we get out of here, I do want to give you one more opportunity, just for those who might not have heard throughout the episode. What you're doing, where to find you, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. It's a pleasure being on. And people, if they want to see my work, you can go to footballguys.com. Like I'm doing right now, a ton of different rankings. And with those rankings come player comments that I'm adding. Seems like every day I add more player comments to my rankings, which is great, because those wind up being featured and not possibly featured. There's a lot of people at Football Guys, but it could potentially be featured into the Draft Dominator. That's where those quotes and stuff come from. So I do a lot of stuff there. I am, like I said, I'm doing my fundraising opportunity here for my brother-in-law, who was in the hospital for 4 months battling COVID and COVID complications. So I'm creating Twitter banners for you, my graphic design ability, which I'm thankful for. If you're interested in having your Twitter banner changed to some sports theme or player theme, anything like that, I'd be happy to do that for you. I just kind of ask that you make a donation in my brother-in-law's cause. So if you're interested in that, check out my Twitter handle. It's my pinned tweets, the first tweet you'll see on my profile, and check that out. So I'd be happy to help in that regard. And I look forward to, I look forward to making them. I enjoy doing it, which is kind of cool. A lot of people are like, oh man, I got this to do. I love doing it. I think it's fun. So, and I'm learning a lot more. I mean, I just started in graphic design a year ago. About a year ago. It was actually a little bit more than a year ago. Last spring, early spring is when I started. I'd get a complete career change, and decided that I wanted to pursue graphic digital design. I went and got my degree. Well, I have my degree. I actually picked up my certificate through a local college in the area, and so I'm looking forward to putting that to good use, and continuing to learn and do what I can to help out in terms of design, because it's a lot of fun to do. And when I combine that with sports, it's a win-win.
Love it, man. Absolutely love it. I appreciate you for coming on, man. It does mean a lot.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you guys want to go check us out, over there at fantasyintervention.com. Once again, that's fantasyintervention.com. You guys can find us on FF_intervention and join our circle _. And check us out on Facebook. We're actually part of a massive group. Over 24,000 people are part of our group. It's called Fantasy Football Discussion, where there are literally 20 out of the 24,000 people active on a day-to-day basis. It's pretty insane. These people are just all over fantasy football all the time. Go check them out, Fantasy Football Discussion on Facebook. And then, of course, you guys can go find us at youtube.com/fantasyintervention. Make sure you guys go hit subscribe and go check out our podcasts. You can just search Fantasy Intervention on pretty much any platform, and we will pop up over there for you. Listen, we appreciate you guys for coming in. Thank you guys for listening. And thank you all for letting us intervene with your fantasy football life. We're out.